What's good, y'all? Welcome back to another F1 video on this lovely Tuesday. We are back with Would Have the Halo. What the Halo have been historic F1 driver fatalities? 40-minute long video. Shout out to the guy who did recommend it. Very am looking forward to this, man. So sit back, get you something to drink. Get some popcorn, some snacks, kick back, relax. Because I've had a very, very good day. 40 minutes. I'm not really sure what to expect. Shout out to Peter Brook who did make the video. Like I said, I'm not really sure what to expect, to be honest. Let's just start out. I'm trying not to pause too much because since this is like a 40-minute long video, it is a pretty long video in general. So I'm trying not to pause for too much. Just let it ride. But if I do have something to say, obviously I will pause. Or I'll just talk while I was going on. But anyway, man, like I said, good race this weekend. You guys, let me know you guys thoughts about the race this past weekend. Obviously, Verstappen did come back and win. Thought Checo had it, but Verstappen. But on that note, don't forget to like the video if you are new to the channel and sub as well. Please sub. It's always good for you guys to sub to the channel as well. That's it. Let's start. That's pretty much it.
It goes without saying that Formula One is a dangerous sport. Huge advancements in safety standards have been made over the years.
Shout out to
but all
Hydro
too
Flash.
often we are reminded of the risks these drivers put themselves at for our entertainment. One of the more recent safety features that has divided a lot of fans is the Halo device. Since its introduction in 2018, it has been credited with protecting numerous drivers from serious injury and death.
That's crazy.
For this video, I thought I'd indulge in a bit of alternative history and look at every case of a driver dying in a Formula One car or from injuries sustained in a Formula One car and see if...
Also, God dang, Chad, you're already pausing it? Yes. God, I do have to say, for a video to be 40 seconds to be 40 minutes long, to have this many driver fatalities in F1 for it to be 40 minutes, man, jeez,
the Halo would have saved their life. I have omitted fatalities from the Indy 500 when it was on the Formula One calendar, as those were not Formula One cars, and I have also omitted fatalities from Formula 2 cars being driven in Formula 1 events, and from historic events, as the cars were not contemporary, no longer used in the Formula 1 World Championship and were technologically obsolete. Despite that, sadly, there are still 39 drivers on this list.
Yankee,
a quick disclaimer,
Villeneuve,
this obviously is a very sensitive
Senna,
subject. There won't be any graphic photos in this video, but I will be discussing and describing
Severe
drivers' injuries, and any instances where I don't consider the Halo to have hypothetically saved a driver's life is not to be seen as a dismissal of its effectiveness in preventing serious injury or death. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first fatality in Formula One was Cameron Earl on June 18, 1952, aged 29.
29.
Formula One in the 1950s was utterly unrecognisable from how it is now. The cars were front-engined, had drum brakes, no seatbelts, no crumble zones, no safety cells, and no roll bars.
No
There was no
seatbelts!
safety car, virtually no enforced procedures in the event of accidents, and there was little more than earthen mounds and hay bales protecting spectators from the cars, as well as no wall or fence separating the pit lane from the track, and no pit lane speed limit. The drivers themselves did not wear fireproof overalls, and many wore only a simple leather cap or no headwear at all until cork helmets were mandated in 1952. There was also no safety car and no centralised safety procedures mandated by the FIA, so practices varied from circuit to circuit.
So they were just driving like just to
a
drive.
driver, but was a technical consultant.
Like they were just driving just to drive.
A test for English racing automobiles at the Motor Industry Research Association's test track at Nuneaton, driving the R14B. He went off track, the car overturned, and he later died in hospital from a fractured skull.
Damn.
One of the difficulties of cars from this era is visualising how you would actually attach a halo to them. Without a roll bar to attach it to, it would end up acting more as a roll cage than for deflecting flying objects. It would be more than strong enough to survive a barrel roll. However, at this time drivers did not wear seatbelts, and the helmets they wore did not cover the face and were not particularly robust. With this in mind, there is every reason to believe Earl could have been thrown from the car or even crushed by the Halo itself.
Again, where is the safety precautions back then?
The Halo would not have saved Cameron Earl's life.
Jeez, they didn't even care. They were just
Charles de Tornaco,
to drive out there.
Driving the Ferrari Tipo 500 during practice for the non-championship Modena Grand Prix at Autodromo de Modena on September 18, 1953, aged 26.
Ooh.
De Tornaco
It's like
was the
2 years
co-founder
older
of
than
his
me.
own team, Écurie Francorchamps, who ran customer Ferraris. De Tornaco suffered a very similar accident to Earl, as he sustained fatal head and neck injuries from a series of barrel rolls and died on his way to the hospital. Again, without seatbelts and a proper helmet, the Halo would not have saved Charles de Tornaco's life. Next is Onofre Marimon, who was killed during practice for the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring on July 31st, 1954, aged 30. Marimon was part of Maserati's fleet of drivers. He was driving the Maserati 250F and went off the track at Breitscheid and went down a steep incline into a ditch and got trapped underneath the car after it rolled several times. This is the third consecutive example of a driver being crushed by their own car. And again, without seatbelts, the Halo would not have kept the driver in their seat and could well have caused them further injury. So no.
You would think after like the first, 2 or 3 drivers, dying, kind of similar like that, you'd be like, oh, you know what, maybe we should install seatbelts to our cars. But nah, F1 didn't care.
The Halo would not have saved Onofre Marimon's
Sorry about that.
life.
Sorry about that.
Next is Mario Alberghetti, who was killed during the non-championship Pau Grand Prix held at Circuit de Pauville in France on April 11, 1955, aged 26. Alberghetti was driving a customer Maserati 4C LT in his race debut and accidentally hit the accelerator instead of the brakes while being lapped and flew into a stack of hay bales and received fatal head and chest injuries and had his helmet torn off.
Oh my god.
This is the kind of accident the Halo is more suited to. It would have no problems deflecting the hay bales away from the driver, and as such would not have torn his helmet off. Without seatbelts and without a safety cell, he still could have sustained serious injuries.
That's what I'm saying.
But yes, the Halo would have saved Mario Alberghetti's life.
Yeah. Next
up is Eugenio Castellotti, who was killed in a private test for Ferrari at Autodromo di Modena on March 14, 1957.
Oh boy, at the girls though. Yeah, the ladies.
He was testing the new Ferrari 801 and clipped a curb at high speed and was thrown almost 100 meters from the car, which itself rolled several times. Without seatbelts, he would have been thrown from his seat and would have more than likely impacted the Halo, which itself could have been fatal. But if not, he would have then rolled with the car. So no, the Halo would not have saved Eugenio Castellotti's life. Next is Luigi Musso, who was killed during the French Grand Prix at Reims on July 6, 1958, aged 33. Musso was in his third season for Ferrari and was driving their Dino 246 car. He ran wide at the Goya curve and struck a ditch which made the car somersaults and died later that day from head injuries. This is another accident where the Halo makes little difference if there are no seatbelts to keep the driver contained within it. So no, the Halo would not have saved Luigi Musso's life.
There was only so much the Halo could do back then, because them guys, they wear no type of seatbelts. They were just driving.
On August 3rd, 1958.
So many instances of these guys just falling off the curb.
He went off the track at high speed and suffered an almost identical accident. So no, the Halo would not have saved Peter Collins' life.
My probably got crushed.
The next driver is Stuart Lewis Evans, who died from injuries sustained during the Moroccan Grand Prix at the Ain Diab circuit on October 25th, 1958, aged 28. Lewis Evans was driving the Vanwall V25 in his second year with the team. The car's engine seized up, which caused him to hit the barriers and for the car to promptly burst into flames. He was eventually extricated from the car and died 6 days later. Here we run into another problem with cars from this era, in that the cars were highly volatile, and fireproof overalls had not been mandated yet.
They have like gas in it, right?
From fire rather than blunt force trauma, so no, the Halo would not have saved Stuart Lewis Evans' life. Going into the 1960s, technological improvements have been made to the cars, such as moving the engine behind the driver, but virtually no advancements in safety had been made, so if anything the cars were even more dangerous the faster they got. There were 8 fatalities in the 1950s, and in my opinion, the Halo would have prevented only one of them. Safety at this time was of minimal concern, and as such there is too much wrong with the cars for the Halo to make much of a difference.
You know what? They're basically like, okay, he died, so what, basically? Well, it's on to next. That's what I got from it. Okay, he died. Next. Like, no type of, like,
the first driver to die in the 1960s was also the first American Formula One driver, Harry Schell.
Oh god, that's
Schell
awful.
was killed in practice for the non-championship BRDC International Trophy at Silverstone on May 13, 1960, aged 38. He was driving the Cooper T51 and lost a wheel after running wide in the rain, which caused the car to somersault, vault the barriers and hit a brick wall. Again, the Halo would not have prevented him from being thrown from the car with no seatbelts to restrain him, So no,
brick
the
wall
Halo
as
would not
well.
have saved Harry Shell's life.
The brick wall as well.
The next driver, Chris Bristow, was killed just over a month later at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa on June 19, 1960, aged 22. Bristow was also driving the Cooper T51 and went off at the very high-speed Burnenfield.
What's going on with this car?
Hit a 4-foot-high embankment and was thrown into a barbed wire fence which decapitated him. In yet another case of a driver being thrown from their car, the Halo would not have saved Chris Bristow's.
I think we listened, bro. I think, was this the Belgian? Or, let me see if I misheard that.
On June 19th, 1960, aged 22.
Was this
Bristow
the Belgian
was also
GP?
driving the Cooper T51 and went off at the very high-speed Burnenfield corner.
Because two
hit a
guys
4-foot-high
died.
embankment and was thrown into a barbed wire fence which decapitated him.
God
In
damn.
yet another case of a driver being thrown from their car, the Halo would not have saved Chris Bristow's life. The next fatality occurred just a few minutes later. Alan Stacey was driving the Lotus 18 in his third year with the team and went off at the same corner only a few laps later, went over the embankment and landed in a hedgerow where the car caught fire. He was 26. There are conflicting accounts regarding what caused Stacey to lose control, but the most common one is that he was hit in the face by a bird, which knocked him unconscious and possibly could have killed him instantly.
Wow.
With a protective halo, it would have been the worst kind of luck for the bird to have missed the halo completely and still directly hit him in the face.
That's awful.
So yes, the halo would have saved Alan Stacey's
That's
life.
Crazy.
The next
A
driver was
bird.
Shane Summers.
That's an
He was
awful way to
killed
go
during
out.
practice for the non-championship Silver City Trophy at Brands Hatch on June 1st, 1961, aged 24. Summers was driving a Cooper T53 owned by Terry Bartram. It was raining heavily and he span at Paddock Hill Bend and crashed into a concrete wall. Once again, without seatbelts, the halo would have only acted as a hindrance. So no, the halo would not have saved Shane Summers' life.
Sorry about that.
The next fatality was only 2 weeks later, on June 15th. Giulio Cabianca was testing a Cooper T51 run by Scuderia Castellotti
Cooper
at
again.
Autodromo di Modena in Italy. The car's throttle got stuck open, and he went off the track, hit a spectator and went straight through the entrance gates to the circuit which had been left open. He then crossed a public road and hit a bicycle, a motorbike, a minivan, 3 parked cars, and then crashed into the wall of a workshop. The motorbike and minivan drivers were both killed, but the spectator survived. Cabianca was conscious but later died in hospital. He was 38. Without being to witness it directly, this is a difficult one to judge as there are so many factors involved.
Bro, a
The Halo was
fan,
certainly
a
a
bike, a
protection from the other
spectator.
vehicles, but in hitting the workshop there's every reason to believe he could have struck the Halo itself and sustained severe head injuries. So no, the Halo would not have saved Giulio Cabianca's life.
Jeez.
The next driver is Wolfgang von Trips, who was killed 2 months later during the Italian Grand
What's
Prix
his
at
name?
Monza on September 10th,
Wolfgang
1961.
von Trips, that's
aged
a name.
33. It was the penultimate round of the season, and von Trips had been fighting for the title all year with Ferrari teammate Phil Hill. His Ferrari 156 locked wheels with the Lotus 21 of Jim Clark running down the back straight to Parabolica, and both drivers rode up an embankment and struck a fence and killed 15 spectators.
Jeez.
Von Trips was then thrown from the car as it span back onto the track. Once again, the main safety issue is the lack of seatbelts, so no, the Halo would not have saved Wolfgang von Trips' life. The next driver is Ricardo Rodriguez, who was killed during practice for the non-championship Mexican Grand Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez on November 1st, 1962, aged 20. He was making his first outing in the Lotus 24, and the right rear suspension failed as he was going through the famous banked Peraltada corner. The car flipped and hit the Armco barriers and burst into flames.
Oh, jeez.
The Halo would have provided some protection when the car flipped,
But not all
even though
really.
roll bars were now compulsory, but it would have made escaping the burning car even harder.
Yeah.
So no, the Halo would not have saved Ricardo
You know how many
Rodriguez.
no's we have said, except for one?
The next driver is Gary Hocking, who was killed during practice for the non-championship Natal Grand Prix at the Westmead circuit in South Africa on December 21st, 1962, aged 25. Hocking was a successful motorbike racer who decided to start dabbling in cars in 1962. The car's rear suspension broke, which caused it to somersault, and Hocking hit his head against the roll hoop and later died in hospital. The Halo would have acted as the roll hoop in this example, and as such Hocking most likely would have sustained the same head injuries without an adequate helmet. So no, the Halo would not have saved Gary Hocking's life. The next driver is Carol Godin de Beaufort, who was killed from injuries sustained during practice for the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring on August 1st, 1964, aged 30. He was driving the Porsche 718
Jesus.
as a privateer and went off track at Bergwerk and was thrown from the car and died in hospital the following day. The Halo was no help in this instance, so no, the Halo would not have saved Carol Godin de Beaufort's life. The next fatality did not occur for another 2 years, when John Taylor was killed, also from injuries at the German Grand Prix, on August 7, 1966, aged 33. He was driving the Brabham BT11 as a privateer and collided with the Matra of rookie Jackie Ickx on the first lap of the race. Taylor's car burst into flames. He was able to escape but died in hospital from his burns 32 days later. In 1963, fireproof overalls started being used. The roll bars are required to be at least 5 centimeters above the driver's head, and the shape of the cockpit was restructured in order to aid in drivers escaping from the car in the event of a fire. God. The Halo would have only hindered his escape from the car, so no, the Halo would not have saved John Taylor's life.
And like all these guys who are like passing away, it all relates back to the seatbelt. Like, thank God everyone added seatbelts and the Halo stuff like that, because man, a lot of these crashes is just F1 just being just stupid in terms of like their health regulations and all that. Because there ain't no way you're just letting these guys just continue to drive, and nobody's not coming up with like the specific reason why. Oh, okay, we keep losing drivers. There has to be a reason behind it, and like nobody's like they just didn't care. Like
the famed Lorenzo Bandini, who was killed from injuries sustained during the Monaco Grand Prix on May 7, 1967, aged 31. Bandini was driving the Ferrari 312 in his 6th year with the team and clipped the guardrail at the harbour chicane on lap 82 while in second place, and then hit a lamppost which caused the car to flip over, land on a hay bale and burst into flames.
Oh, that's bad.
The marshals managed to flip the car back over and extricate Bandini, but he has sustained severe burns and died in hospital 3 days later.
That was probably it.
Again, the Halo would have only hindered his escape from the car, so no, the Halo would not have saved Lorenzo Bandini's life. After Bandini's death, hay bales were banned and replaced with Armco barriers. The next driver is Bob Anderson, who was killed in a private test at Silverstone on August 14, 1967, aged 36. Anderson was driving the Brabham BT11 for privateer team DW Racing Enterprises in the wet and went off the track and hit a marshal's post. He suffered severe chest and neck injuries and died in hospital. Yet again, a seatbelt would have made the difference here, so no, the Halo would not have saved Bob Anderson's life. The final driver killed in the 1960s was Joe Schlesser. He was killed during the French Grand Prix at Rouen-les-Essarts on August 1st, 1969, aged 40. Schlesser was driving the Honda RA302 on its first outing in a Formula 1 Grand Prix. He ran wide at the Seafrère corner on the second lap and hit a bank which ruptured the fuel tank and caused the car's magnesium body to immediately erupt into white-hot flames. Schlesser had no chance of escape and Honda immediately withdrew from Formula 1. Halo or no Halo, there was nothing he could do. So no, the Halo would not have saved Joe Schlesser's life.
Like those instances in which like they're driving like
13 fatalities in
13.
And in my opinion, only one of them would have been prevented by the Halo. By far the biggest issues with the cars were the lack of seatbelts and lack of fire protection.
Still,
small gains in safety had been made, but at the end of the 1960s, there was a push to make major safety improvements, fronted by Jackie Stewart. Some drivers began using seatbelts and full-face helmets in 1968, and improved fire extinguishers were introduced in 1969.
About time.
In 1970, a wall separating the pit lane from the track was mandated. Spectators had to stand at least 3 meters behind guard railings, and improved fuel tanks were introduced that would not rupture so easily. The cars as well now had front and rear wings, and took on the same basic shape as modern Formula 1 cars, so the Halo becomes more fitted to its modern purpose and design. The first fatality in the 1970s was Piers Courage, who was killed during the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort on June 21, 1970, aged 28. He was driving the De Tomaso 505/38 for Frank Williams racing cars.
Frank Williams.
Either the suspension or the steering column broke as he approached Tunnel Aust, and he went straight on through the fence and hit an embankment, at which point the magnesium car broke apart and burst into flames.
Yeah.
At the same time, one of the wheels broke off and struck Courage in the head, which tore his helmet off and is believed may have either knocked him unconscious or killed him on impact. With the halo, he would have been protected from the flying wheel, and as such would have been fully conscious when the car burst into flames. The magnesium-fueled fire burned extremely fiercely, but as the car was still upright, there is every reason to believe he could have got out, but would have sustained severe burns. So yes, the halo would have saved Pierre Courage's life.
Ah, good. That's
The next
crazy
driver
though.
is Formula One's first and so far only posthumous world champion, Jochen Rindt, who was killed during qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza on September 5th, 1970, also aged 28. Rindt had been comfortably...
And he's driving so young as well.
72C. The car was fitted with a 5-point harness, but Rindt only used 4 of the 5 points in order to enable him to escape quickly in the event of a fire. He had also removed the rear wing entirely in order to achieve greater top speeds, but this had the added effect of making the car less stable.
But
He lost control
faster.
braking for Parabolica and veered off track and went through a joint in the Armco barriers and hit a stanchion head on. The front of the car was completely destroyed, and as he was not wearing his seatbelt correctly, he slid down the driver's seat and had his throat slit by the buckle. Had he been wearing his seatbelt correctly, he could well have survived, but still with severe leg injuries. A mandatory 6-point harness was later introduced in 1972. The halo would have played no role in an accident like this, so no, the halo would not have saved Jochen Rindt's life.
Oh.
The next driver is Joe
yeah.
Siffert, who was killed at the non-championship World Championship victory race at Brands Hatch on October 24, 1971, aged 35. Siffert was driving the BRM P160 in his first year with the team. He had a small collision with Ronnie Peterson on the first lap which damaged his suspension. The suspension then gave way at Hawthorne Bend on lap 15 and he hit an earthen bank and the car rolled over and caught fire.
Yeah.
For 1971, it had been mandated that drivers must be able to exit the cockpit within 5 seconds in the event of a fire, and all cars had to be tested to conform to this. Siffert only suffered a fractured leg in the crash but was completely trapped in the upside-down car as none of the marshal's fire extinguishers were
Yeah, I was
working
going to say, because
and they weren't able to get to him for more than 5 minutes, by which point he died of smoke inhalation.
of course, the fire extinguishers don't work. Just the worst of luck. That's awful. Of course, at that time, it doesn't work.
This fatality was caused by faulty fire extinguishers, and the halo would have only made it harder to extricate Siffert from the car. So no, the halo would not have saved Joe
But there have been
Siffert's life.
some instances in which like
From
the
here
halo
onwards,
itself
all fire
has kind of hindered
extinguishers
drivers
in
up
the entry, as well as
potentially
piped
getting
air
out of
that
like
could be fed
cars.
into the drivers' helmets. The next driver is Roger Williamson, who was killed during the
Yeah.
Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort on July
We know
29,
about him.
1973,
Yeah, we know
aged
about him.
25. Williamson was driving the March 731 in only his second race in Formula 1
We know about
and
him.
suffered a tyre failure on lap 8 that caused the car to flip over and burst into flames. The scenes of fellow driver David Purley abandoning his car and desperately trying to help Williamson while their marshals look on became famous around the world. At this time, track marshals did not wear fireproof overalls, so they were unable to go near the car. Purley used up an entire extinguisher on the car, but it still did not put the fire out, and Williamson died of smoke inhalation. As of Joe Siffert, halo or no halo, he could not escape from the car.
Yeah.
So no, the halo would not
That
have
smoke
saved
itself is already
Williamson's
probably
life.
so thick and just powerful.
The next driver is Francois Sever, who was
Yeah,
killed
man.
during practice for
Yeah,
the
we
United
checked him
States
out.
Grand Prix at Watkins
We
Glen
did react to
on
him. He's gonna be a
October
good driver
6th,
too, man.
1973, aged 29.
He's gonna be a legend.
He was driving the Tyrrell 006
Tyrrell.
and had been playing a supporting role to the recently crowned 3-time champion Jackie Stewart.
That's right. Here's what the Jackies.
Sever caught a bump on the curbs going through the S's and hit the barriers on the right-hand side, and was then deflected head-on into the barriers on the other side, which breached the cockpit as he went through them. With the halo, there would have been no such breaching of the cockpit by the Armco, so yes, the halo would have saved Francois Sever's life.
You know what's crazy? That was gonna be a race Jackie Story gave him his first win, because Jackie Story, he was going to retire at the end of that season, and he was like, "Man, let me give it to my guy," and sucks. That sucks. That sucks.
The next driver is Peter Revson, who was killed during a test session preceding the South African Grand Prix at Kyalami on March 22, 1974, aged 35. Revson was driving the Shadow DN3 in his first season with the team and suffered a front suspension failure at Barbecue Bend, which sent him into the Armco barriers, where the car was flipped on its nose, got wrapped in the barrier, and then caught fire. This is another fatality caused by fire, and the Halo would have only hindered any escape.
Yeah.
So no, the Halo would not have saved Peter
When it
Racing.
comes to fire and all that, that Halo is
The next driver
basically
is Helmut
just...
Koenig, who was killed during the United
I
States
wasn't really
Grand Prix
doing
at
too
Watkins
much.
Glen on October 6, 1974, aged 25, at the same circuit as Francois Sever exactly 1 year later. He was driving the Surtees TS16 and only his second race for the team, when he suffered a suspension failure approaching turn 7 and went head-on into the Armco barriers. The bottom rung gave way and the car went straight through it, which caused him to be decapitated by the top rung. With the Halo in place, he would have punched straight through both rungs with only minor injuries. So yes, the Halo would have saved Helmut Koenig's life.
Decapitated. Was it 2 or 3 times with very drivers? Barbed wire, the freaking railing. Is that right? I think it's raining. Sorry about that.
Next is Mark Donoghue, who was killed by injury sustained during practice for the Austrian Grand Prix at the Österreichring on August 17, 1975, aged 38. Donoghue was driving for Penske and had recently switched to the March 751 chassis. He suffered a tyre failure at the Wurst-Hügel curve and went through the catch fencing. Headrests behind the driver's head had been introduced that year. It's believed that he hit his head on a fence post or a nearby billboard, as initially he seemed unharmed, but developed a headache which gradually got worse, and the following day he went to hospital and lapsed into a coma and died from a cerebral hemorrhage. The Halo would have offered full protection against either the fence post or the billboard.
Halo would have,
so yes, the Halo would have saved Mark Donoghue's life. The next driver is Tom Price, who was killed during the South African Grand Prix at Prince George Circuit on March 5, 1977, aged 27. Price was in his 4th year with Shadow, driving the DN8. Teammate Renzo Zorzi pulled over just after a blind crest on the start-finish straight on lap 22 after his car caught fire. 2 marshals then ran across from the pit wall, one of which, 19-year-old Frederik Janssen van Voorden, was carrying a 40-pound fire extinguisher. Price was immediately behind Hans-Joachim Stuck, who swerved just in time to miss both marshals. Price had no time to react and hit Van Voorden at 170 miles per hour. Van Voorden was killed on impact, and Price was hit in the face with the fire extinguisher and killed instantly. The car carried on down the main straight with the roll bar bent backwards and the engine cover torn off by the fire extinguisher and collided with the Ligier of Jacques Lafitte at Crowthorne Corner. With the Halo, Van Voorden still would not have survived, but Price would have been fully protected from the fire extinguisher. He still would have crashed from the impact, but there's every chance he would have survived without any breaching of the cockpit. So yes, the Halo would have saved Tom Price's life.
But the good, I'm not gonna say a good thing because it's not anything really good, but at least we are starting to see like more instances in which the Halo could have prevented like F1 driver fatalities. I mean, some of the crashes in the 70s were just straight out gruesome. A lot of them was just suspension area, tire stuff like that, tires going out. The one with Tom Price, in which he hit somebody and the fire extinguisher basically kills someone impact. The one with Donoghue. Oh, dude. But at least we are starting to see like more instances in which the Halo could have prevented a lot of these.
The next driver is Brian Maguire.
It's still awful though.
Practice for round 11 of the Shell
Still awful.
International
Still
Series
awful.
at Brands Hatch on August 29, 1977, age 31. Maguire was running a Williams FW04 he'd bought, modified and rebadged as a Maguire BM1. Specific details about this accident are scarce, but it is believed he suffered a shaft failure and went backwards through a marshal's post, killing one of the 3 marshals stationed there, 24-year-old John Thorpe, and then went through the barriers. If the fatal injuries were sustained when the car was going backwards, then no, the Halo would not have saved Brian Maguire's life. The final driver killed in the 1970s was Ronnie Peterson.
That was a lot of drivers in the 70s. Probably was more in the 70s.
At Monza on September 10, 1978.
Than the 60s.
Peterson was in his 5th year with Lotus, who the previous year while he was driving for Tyrrell had unveiled their groundbreaking Type 78, which was the first Formula 1 car to utilise ground effect, dramatically increasing cornering speeds. The team used this car again for the first half of 1978, but launched the much improved Type 79 at the Spanish Grand Prix. Peterson crashed in practice at the Italian Grand Prix and totaled his car. The only other Type 79 chassis available had been tailored to teammate Mario Andretti, so Peterson was forced to use an old Type 78 chassis. At the start of the race, the lights went out before the back markers lined up, which bunched the field up as they approached the first chicane. Peterson had a poor start and lost several places. Jody Scheckter and Riccardo Patrese ran wide onto the old approach to the banked oval.
Jody Scheckter.
As they rejoined, James Hunt swerved left just behind them and hit Peterson, and another 8 cars then collided with them from behind.
Oh my god.
Peterson went into the barriers and the car then burst into flames.
Jeez!
He was quickly pulled from the car, but had sustained severe leg injuries. Peterson was taken to hospital along with Vittorio Brambilla, who had been struck on the head by a flying wheel and was left comatose for several months. Peterson had numerous fractures in both legs. Overnight, he developed a fat embolism and then died from kidney failure the following morning. With the halo in place, Brambilla would have been unharmed in the accident, but it would have made no difference to Peterson, as his leg injuries were caused by the lack of a safety cell in the cars at the time, so no, the halo would not have saved Ronnie Peterson's life. There were major safety improvements across the 1970s.
Yeah, that's what I said,
and it shows, as of the 11 fatalities across the decade, in my opinion, 5 of them would have been prevented by the halo.
Which is a lot better compared to the 60s and 50s, man. Like, a lot better. I thought, to me, I felt like it was more people we lost in the 70s compared to the 60s, but like I said, with the steady improvement, man, which was finally a step in the right direction for F1 to improve on player. Almost at place on driver safety, it was still, like I said, still improving, but still, man, we still had, drivers dying in just some gruesome ways.
Excessively long circuits such
fires,
as Spa were either removed from the calendar or shortened in order to enable a quicker response from marshals and medical teams in the case of accidents such as Niki Lauda's near-fatal one at the Nürburgring in 1976. Mandatory 6-point harnesses prevented drivers being thrown from the cars. Full-face helmets gave improved helmet protection. From 1975, fireproof overalls were mandated for drivers, marshals and mechanics, and the cars were easier to escape from. However, they were still susceptible to fire, and many of them were still made of aluminium, which could not survive accidents at increasingly high speeds. Formula 1 went into the 1980s in the ground effect era, with cars that had never been faster but were very unstable, and it was clear the cars needed to be physically stronger. The first driver fatality in the 1980s was Patrick Depailler, who was killed during a private test at the Hockenheim Ring on August 1st, 1980, aged 35. Depailler was in his first year of Alfa Romeo and was testing their 179 chassis when he suffered a suspension failure going through the Ostkurve.
That's a nice car,
He hit the Armco barriers and the car was flipped over, and he sustained fatal head injuries as the car skidded along the Armco for several hundred yards before eventually flipping back over. In light of this accident, a chicane was added at the Ostkurve to slow the cars down. The halo plus the harness would have more than likely kept his head away from the Armco barriers, so yes, the halo would have saved Patrick Depailler's life. The next driver is Gilles Villeneuve, who was killed from injuries sustained during qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix of Boulder in 1982, aged 32.
Isn't the Canadian GP named after him, right? If I'm correct, I think the Canadian GP is named after him.
Villeneuve had been with Ferrari since 1977. At the previous round in Imola, teammate Didier Pironi had taken the win from Villeneuve after the team had ordered them to slow down, which Villeneuve also took to mean to maintain position. Villeneuve was incensed by this, and in qualifying at Zolder he was battling for pole position with Pironi. Villeneuve went out for an extra run on his final set of tyres and approached Jochen Mass going through the Butts curve. Mass moved over to the right, off the racing line to allow Villeneuve through. Villeneuve also moved to the right and clipped him from behind and was launched into the air. His 126C2 chassis landed 100 metres further down the track and promptly disintegrated. Villeneuve lost his helmet and was thrown from the car, still trapped to his seat, and hit the catch fencing off the opposite side of Terlammen boxed corner. Villeneuve had suffered a broken neck and was rushed to the hospital and taken off life support later that evening. This was the first fatal accident since the 1960s where a driver had been thrown from the car. but in this case the entire cockpit disintegrated and the seat went with him.
Jeez.
With this in mind, the Halo was unlikely to have stopped this happening and could have inflicted injuries of its own. So no, the Halo would not have saved Gilles Villeneuve's life. The next driver is Riccardo Paletti, who was killed only a month later at the Canadian Grand Prix at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on June 13, 1982,
I feel like I've heard of
2 days before his 24th birthday. Paletti was in his debut season with Vazella, and Canada was only the second race he qualified for. Pole sitter Didier Pironi stalled when the lights went out and was just clipped by Raoul Boesel, but Paletti rear-ended him at full speed. The nose of his FA1C was severely crumpled, and Paletti had leg fractures and severe chest injuries from having hit the steering wheel. When FIA head Dr. Sid Watkins climbed over the car to get to him, the petrol tank ignited, and Paletti was dead by the time the fire was extinguished.
Jeez.
The previous year had seen the advent of the carbon fibre safety cell, which greatly improved protection around the cockpit, but the driver's feet still extended beyond the front axle, which made them vulnerable to head-on collisions. Paletti had no head injuries and was killed by inadequate cockpit strength, so no, the Halo would not have saved Riccardo Paletti's life. The final driver killed in the 1980s was Elio De Angelis,
It's like
who was killed
5,
from injuries sustained
6.
during a private test at Paul Ricard.
So again, it's smaller.
1986, aged 28. De Angelis had spent 6 successful years at Lotus before moving to Brabham in 1986. He was testing the BC-55 when the rear wing broke off. He then veered off track and cartwheeled over a barrier and the car burst into flames.
Cartwheel.
There were very few marshals in attendance and he was eventually rescued after 30 minutes and taken to hospital where he died the following day from smoke inhalation.
Where in March was that?
De Angelis was trapped inside the car with only minor injuries, despite the fact that cockpit openings had been enlarged since 1979 in order to help drivers escape. The Halo would have been no help in this case, so no, the Halo would not have saved Elio De Angelis' life. The safety improvements in the
Again, 4. So like I said, we're still seeing drivers unfortunately pass away, but it's getting smaller and smaller. My God, Villeneuve was awful, man. Was it Paletti? Paletti was bad. Patrick and dude, and like seeing the aftermaths of the cars afterwards. Oh, jeez, man. God, it's.
The 1980s were clear to see, as there were only 4 fatalities compared to 11 in the 1970s. However, they were 4 very different accidents, and in my opinion, only one of them would have been prevented by the Halo. Ground effect and then turbos had massively increased the speed.
Man, look at the cars, man.
And several other drivers had non-fatal but life-changing accidents as a result. The arrival of carbon fibre as a replacement for aluminium greatly strengthened the cars, and from 1988 the entire monocoque had to pass the FAA crash tests.
Good. Hold up. So they weren't doing crash tests before this? Let's just finish the video out.
The next fatality did not occur for another 8 years, when Roland Ratzenberger was killed during qualifying for the San Marino Grand Prix on April 30th, 1994, aged 33. The cars had transformed in this time. The cockpits were virtually impenetrable as the front axle had been moved in front of the driver's feet. Detachable steering wheels had been introduced to help drivers escape faster. Standardized safety and strength tests for the safety cell, roll bar and seatbelts were brought in,
That's good.
And the safety car, which had first been used only once in 1973, was mandated when there were obstructions on track. Ratzenberger was in his rookie year with
So the safety car, that's a nice car.
The Jordan of Rubens Barrichello had already suffered a major accident in the first qualifying session on the Friday and was in hospital. During the second session on Saturday, Ratzenberger damaged his front wing during his first run, and went out for his second without having it replaced. The wing gave way on the approach to the high.
Why? Again, some of the decisions is just why?
High-speed Villeneuve corner and got trapped underneath the car. Ratzenberger then went into a concrete wall at almost 200 miles per hour. Ratzenberger was struck in the head by the front right wheel and also suffered a ruptured aorta and a basilar skull fracture from the wheel hitting his helmet against the headrest. Each of these injuries individually would have been fatal. The Halo would have protected him from the flying wheel and as such he also would not have suffered the skull fracture. The extreme force of the impact, however, would have still caused the rupture in his aorta, so no, the halo would not have saved Roland Ratzenberger's life. And then of course we get to Ayrton Senna, who was killed in the race the following day. Senna was in his first year with Williams, driving the FW16, which itself was barely different from the all-dominant FW14B and FW15C, but did not have the electronic driver aids such as traction control, ABS and active suspension that were key to those cars' successes. He had crashed out of the previous 2 races and had complained about the car being very twitchy, aerodynamically unstable and unpredictable to drive, particularly over bumps. The Benetton of Michael Schumacher had breezed to victory in both races, and Senna was convinced they were still using traction control. Senna got pole position, and on the morning of the race, the drivers agreed to reform the Grand Prix Drivers Association, a trade union that originally formed in 1961 to push for improved safety and had disbanded in 1982.
So Senna told the team, people whatever, that the car wasn't really good. There were some issues, it wasn't really stable, and they still decided to let him drive. That's crazy. Just crazy.
The safety car was brought out after a collision on the grid between JJ Leto and Pedro Lamy. Senna had been gesturing to the safety car driver, driving an Opel Vectra to go faster as the tyres and brakes were losing temperature. The race resumed on lap 6. Senna went off the track at the high-speed Tamburello corner on lap 7 and hit a concrete wall at 130 miles per hour.
God.
It is believed that the car's steering column had snapped, possibly as a result of the bumps on the circuit. Michael Schumacher, running behind, had said that Senna had nearly lost the car at the exact same place on the previous lap. Senna was struck on the head by the front right wheel, which rammed his helmet into the headrest, just as with Roland Ratzenberger.
Yeah, Ratzenberger.
Suspension components had penetrated his helmet through the visor and Senna's forehead, which ruptured the superficial temporal artery, causing massive blood loss. In both these accidents, the safety cells had done their job and remained completely intact, but it was their helmets that were exposed. As with Ratzenberger, the halo would have protected Senna from the flying wheel, which would have also prevented the skull fracture. With this in mind, it's unlikely that the suspension attached to the wheel would have breached the cockpit either. In an age before the hands device, he still could have suffered severe bruising to his neck, but yes, the halo would have saved Ayrton Senna's life. In the aftermath of this terrible weekend came the next major wave of safety improvements. Short-term fixes in 1994 came in the form of temporary chicanes at different circuits to slow the cars down. Imola itself had permanent chicanes placed at Tamburello and Villeneuve. A speed limit was introduced in the pit lane as well as a ban on overtaking in the pit lane.
Drivers were just speeding out the pit lane.
Detachable headrests.
Drivers were just speeding out the pit lane.
Shoulders were no longer exposed were introduced. Side impact tests for the safety cells were introduced. The cars were slowed down with the introduction of smaller engines and groove tyres, and wheel tethers were brought in to prevent wheels flying off in accidents. The hands device was introduced in 2003, which would prevent the driver's helmet from swinging back and forth excessively in high-speed impacts. Tech Pro barriers began to replace tyre barriers and concrete walls, and runoff areas started to replace grass and gravel traps. And finally, we have Jules Bianchi, who was killed from injuries sustained during the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka on October 5th, 2014, which is the main reason we have the halo in the first place. The 20-year interval between this accident and Senna and Ratzenberger's shows how much safety had improved in that time, as even major injuries were rare. Bianchi was in his second year with backmarker team Marussia and had Adrian Sutil on his tail in the rain. Sutil caught a small stream forming at the Dunlop curve on lap 42 and span across the gravel and into the barriers. Double-waved yellow flags were waved and a crane came to the scene to retrieve his car. Bianchi caught that same stream the following lap and went across the gravel and went helmet first into the rear of the crane at 70 miles per hour. Despite the relatively low speed of the impact, the roll bar and engine cover were torn off Bianchi's MR03 and the crane dropped Sutil's Sauber. Bianchi's helmet had taken the full force of the impact in a glancing blow and knocked Bianchi unconscious. The race was abandoned and Bianchi was rushed to hospital and diagnosed with a diffuse axonal injury, rendering him essentially brain dead.
Oh my god.
He was placed into an induced coma and was transported to a hospital in Nice, where he died 9 months later on July 17, 2015, aged 26. This was truly a freak accident, which had been preceded by a very similar one 2 years earlier, also in a Marussia. Marussia's then test driver Maria de Villota was doing a straight line test at an airfield, when at the end of the test the car suddenly accelerated and went helmet first into the loading platform of a lorry at 30 miles per hour. De Villota sustained severe head injuries and lost her right eye. She appeared to have made a full recovery, but died from a heart attack on October 11, 2013, aged 33, while the Japanese Grand Prix itself was ongoing. There were now serious talks of introducing increased helmet protection, and after a polycarbonate windshield was experimented with, the Halo was first tested in 2016 and then introduced in 2018. With the Halo, both De Villota and Bianchi would have been completely unharmed. Bianchi's accident was relatively low speed, and the Halo would have taken the full force of the impact with the crane and harmlessly deflected the car away.
It's a freak accident.
The Halo would have saved Jules Bianchi's life.
Just a freak accident.
So, out of the 39 drivers on this list, in my opinion, 10 of them would have been saved by the Halo. This number looks worse than it is, as in the majority of cases there were too many other problems with car design for the Halo to have made any meaningful difference. Alas, we cannot change the past, but we have the Halo today, as well as all the other advanced safety features and practices. Long gone are the days of no helmets,
Look at
no
that.
seatbelts,
That's
and no
crazy. How they
Track marshals still volunteer as they always have, but they are all trained in proper safety procedures and must all wear fireproof helmets and overalls. Armco barriers are gone, and the tracks are all lined with catch fencing reinforced with a concrete base and either a thick wall of tyre barriers or Tech Pro. The safety car and the virtual safety car make regular appearances in races, and a medical car now follows the drivers round on the first lap, and every circuit has on-site medical staff and facilities and a helicopter to escort drivers to hospital if necessary. The cars themselves are made entirely out of carbon fibre and are subject to extremely rigorous safety and crash tests. The drivers wear near indestructible helmets and several layers of fireproof overalls, which are fitted with various sensors giving real-time telemetry data on the driver's condition.
That's pretty cool.
The Halo itself has been credited with saving the lives of numerous drivers since its introduction, including Charles Leclerc at Spa in 2018, and most famously,
Grosjean,
in 2020,
Grosjean,
who suffered an accident reminiscent of many in the 1970s.
Yeah.
There will always be room for improvement, but as it is, the cars have never been safer, and we can only hope that in the future no other drivers are added to this list.
That's a hell of a video. That was a hell of a video. Hope you guys stay awake. Hope you guys still enjoyed it. For the safety cars to be MIA throughout like the 70s and 80s, I think you mentioned. The dirt fields. You guys have always known. I've always mentioned about the spectators being so close towards the track, in which we've seen instances in which we have lost multiple spectators. Thank God for the Halo, honestly. Thank God for the Halo being introduced in F1. Say I potentially 10 out of 39 drivers. Hopefully I got that number right to be potentially saved. Is it's something. It's it's still a low number, but the thing we've seen with the Halo is that when it comes down to like the fire stuff like that, it's not as effective, but there are instances in which the Halo can be very, very effective, in which it is now. And for F1, you go into 60s and 70s with like minimal health changes, stuff like that. It wasn't until Jackie Stewart to really do that. But on that note, you guys, let me know your guys' thoughts and comments about this video, man. Again, shout out to Pete who didn't make the video. Don't forget to like the video, sub as well. Peace.